I looked at the pile of truth sitting in front of me and knew no amount of lies could bury it again. My name is Conrad Henderson, and I'm 39 years old. Each morning I wake before dawn, check on my children, and plan our day with the precision that keeps us safe now. The moment still burns vividly. Riza Henderson, my wife of 11 years, stumbling through our living room with glazed eyes, grabbing our 8-year-old son Liam's arm until he screamed. Our daughter Ava, 11 and trembling, watched from the doorway as her mother laughed at my shock. My stomach turned to stone. I didn't rage. I filmed everything, restrained Riza's wrists, and called the police while she spat threats. When betrayal wears the face you once loved, you learn to fight with evidence instead of emotion. But let me start from the beginning. Before I go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow I will share a story you don't want to miss. I sat in our living room watching rain streak down the window like slow tears. It was just after 7, and the house held that odd silence that comes before a storm, both outside and in. Ava had finished her homework and was reading in the corner of the couch. Liam was sprawled on the carpet with his tablet, racing cartoon cars through digital landscapes. The low rumble of thunder rolled in the distance. "Dad, when's Mom coming home?" Liam asked, not looking up from his screen. "Soon," I said. "She's having a drink with Grandma Irene." One drink. That's what she'd said 3 hours ago. One quick drink with her mother to catch up. I checked my phone. No messages. No surprise there. I glanced at the clock. 7:42 p.m. Bedtime was 8 count for Liam, 8:30 for Ava. I'd already laid out their pajamas and toothbrushes, a routine I'd taken over months ago when Riza's one drinks started stretching into late nights. The sound of tires on wet pavement pulled my attention back to the window. Headlights cut through the darkness and a car door slammed. I recognized the uneven rhythm of Riza's steps on our walkway, that particular stumble that only came from too many glasses of whatever she'd convinced herself was just one. The front door flew open, banging against the wall. Riza stood there, rain-soaked and swaying slightly, her eyes unfocused but somehow sharp with anger. The smell hit me immediately. Vodka, not even masked with mints anymore. "Why's he still up?" she demanded, pointing at Liam. "It's past bedtime." I checked my watch. "It's 7:45, Riza. He has 15 more minutes." She kicked off her shoes, missing the mat completely. "Don't correct me in front of them." Her voice had that slurred edge that made Ava pull her knees to her chest. "Hey, buddy," I said calmly to Liam. 5 more minutes on the tablet, okay?" Liam nodded, but his eyes stayed on his mother. He'd learned to track her movements just like Ava had, just like I had. The skill none of us wanted. "I said turn it off now." Riza lurched forward, grabbing for the tablet. "You never listen to me anymore." "Mom, I'm just finishing," Liam started. Her hand shot out, gripping his upper arm so hard I could see her nails digging into his skin. "Don't talk back to me." "Ow, Mom, that hurts." Liam tried to pull away. Then she pinched, hard and deliberate, twisting the skin of his forearm between her fingers until he yelped in pain. Ava screamed, a high, thin sound that broke something loose in my chest. I moved across the room in 2 strides, my phone already in my hand. The video recording started on instinct. "Let him go, Riza. Now." My voice came out steady, though my pulse hammered in my throat. "Mind your own business," she snarled, but I was already prying her fingers off Liam's arm, revealing angry red marks that would bruise by morning. I held her wrists firmly, not hurting her, just containing, and guided her to the couch. "Sit down." "Get your hands off me," she shouted, struggling. "You're hurting me. This is assault." "I'm recording this, Riza," I said, making sure the camera caught everything. "You're drunk, and you just hurt our son." Her laugh was ugly. "You're pathetic, always so controlling. I had 1 drink with my mother. Look at his arm, Riza. He's fine. He's just dramatic, like you." I turned to the kids. "Ava, take Liam upstairs to the bathroom. Put some ice on his arm." Ava nodded, her face pale, and led her brother away. The moment they were out of sight, Riza's facade cracked further. "You think you're so perfect," she hissed. "I'll tell everyone what you really are. I'll tell the police you hit me. Who do you think they'll believe?" "The truth," I said, still recording. "They'll believe the truth." Blue and red lights flashed through the rain-streaked windows. Someone must have heard the shouting and called it in. Or maybe it was the screams. 2 officers, a woman and a man, approached our door. I didn't lower my phone. "Sir, we received a domestic disturbance call," the female officer said. "Officer Porter," I read her nameplate. "My wife came home intoxicated and hurt our son. I've been recording since it happened." The male officer, Ellis according to his badge, spoke to Riza while Officer Porter checked Liam's arm upstairs. The bruise was already forming, a dark stain spreading under his skin. "She did this?" Officer Porter asked gently. Liam nodded, tears streaming down his face. "He was being bad," Riza slurred from the doorway, where Officer Ellis was supporting her. "Conrad's turning them against me." Officer Porter watched the video on my phone, her face professionally neutral, but her eyes hardening as she listened to Riza's threats. "Mr. Henderson, you did the right thing," she said finally. "We're issuing a temporary protective order. Your wife needs to leave the premises tonight." "You can't kick me out of my own house," Riza shouted. "He's the one who should go." As they escorted her toward the door, she turned back to me, eyes full of venom. "You'll regret this, Conrad. I promise you will." The front door closed behind them. The sirens faded. The rain continued its steady rhythm against the windows. I sat at our kitchen table, listening to the house creak and settle. Upstairs, the children were finally asleep, exhausted by tears and fear. I stared at the dark bruise on my son's arm captured in a photo on my phone, evidence of the moment my marriage ended in front of my children. I woke at dawn with a heaviness in my chest. For one merciful moment, I didn't remember why. Then it all came crashing back, Liam's yelp of pain, Ava's scream, Riza's eyes wild with anger and something darker. The house was too quiet. No footsteps in the kitchen, no coffee brewing, none of the small morning sounds that used to mark our days. I checked on the kids first. They were sleeping tangled in their blankets, faces still puffy from crying. I let them rest. In the kitchen, I pulled out a notepad and started writing everything down while it was fresh. The time Riza came home, the smell of vodka, the exact words she'd said, the way she'd gripped Liam's arm, the threatening comments she'd made after the police arrived. I took photos of Liam's arm when he woke up. The bruise had darkened overnight into an ugly purple crescent, each fingertip mark distinct. My phone buzzed with a text from Officer Porter. "Report filed. Call if you need anything else documented." I saved the text, another piece in what I was already thinking of as my evidence file. The doorbell rang just as I was pouring a second cup of coffee. Janice from next door stood on the porch with a casserole dish and concern etched across her face. "I made breakfast," she said, handing me the warm dish. "I heard the commotion last night. The police car." "Thanks, Janice." I accepted it awkwardly, not sure what else to say. She glanced past me into the house. "Are the children okay?" "They're still asleep." I hesitated. Riza hurt Liam. Left a bruise. Janice's lips tightened. "I've heard the shouting before. Seen her stumbling in late. If you need someone to testify about what I've witnessed over the past few months, you call me." I nodded, surprised at the offer and the fierce certainty behind it. After breakfast, I called Dana Ruiz. She'd handled my cousin's divorce 3 years ago, a tough case with a fair outcome. I gave her the bare facts, Riza's drinking, the incident with Liam, the protective order. "Document everything," Dana instructed, her voice clipped and professional. "Start compiling a pattern, dates, times, receipts from bars if you have them, text messages, voicemails, especially anywhere she admits to drinking. Has this happened before? The physical stuff? Not to the kids." I swallowed. "But the drinking's been getting worse for about 2 years since she lost her job. We need to establish a timeline. Your wife's going to claim this was a one-time mistake. We need to show it wasn't." I spent the next hour creating a spreadsheet, filling in dates from memory. The night she passed out on the bathroom floor. The parent-teacher conference she slurred through. The time she forgot to pick up Ava from soccer practice and I found my daughter waiting alone in the dark. When my phone rang and Irene's name flashed on the screen, I almost didn't answer. But I needed to know what Riza was saying, what narrative she was spinning. "Conrad, this is ridiculous. Irene started without preamble. You've completely embarrassed my daughter. Police? Really? This is a private family matter. Your daughter hurt my son, Irene. I kept my voice level. There's nothing private about that. It was one mistake. You're acting like she's some kind of criminal. This isn't her first mistake. Her drinking has been out of control for months. Irene's voice hardened. Riza told me you've been controlling and emotionally abusive. That you drove her to have a few drinks to cope. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Is that what she told you about the bruise on Liam's arm? That I drove her to that? Silence. Then, she's coming to get some clothes tonight. I expect you to be civil. They arrived at 6. I'd prepared the kids, telling them Mom needed some space, but that they'd see her soon. I didn't want to poison them against her, but I couldn't pretend everything was normal either. Riza looked different. Hair neatly styled, makeup covering the haggard edges, eyes clear. She'd pulled herself together for this performance. Irene stood beside her like a sentinel. I've come for my things, Riza announced in the foyer. The children too. The protective order is still in effect, I said. You can take your clothes. The kids stay here. Irene stepped forward. Conrad, be reasonable. What happened was unfortunate, but Riza is their mother. She made one mistake. One mistake? I echoed. Like the time she passed out and Ava had to call me from her phone? Or the 3 school events she showed up drunk to? Or last night when she did this? I showed them the photo of Liam's arm. Riza's face contorted. You're loving this, aren't you? Playing the victim? You've been waiting for an excuse. I've been waiting for you to get help. I don't need help, she hissed. I need my children. You hurt Liam. It was an accident. I barely touched him. I shook my head. You don't get to call hurting Liam a mistake. If you do this, she said, voice dropping to something dangerous, if you keep my children from me, I will ruin you. Do you understand? I will take everything. You need to leave now, I said, holding the door. This isn't over, she promised as she walked out, Irene hurrying after her with a disappointed glance back at me. I locked the door behind them, leaning against it. The kids were upstairs, thankfully out of earshot for that exchange. My phone pinged with a bank alert at 11 that night. I opened it to find a notification, $900 withdrawn from our joint account at an ATM across town. So it begins, I thought. The war after the first battle. 3 days later, I pushed through the heavy glass door of Dana Ruiz's downtown office building. The elevator smelled like coffee and carpet cleaner. I checked my watch, 5 minutes early for our 9 o'clock appointment. Dana's office was nothing like those wood-paneled lawyer lairs from TV. It was bright, practical, and uncluttered, like she couldn't stand to waste time on pretense. She stood when I entered, shook my hand firmly, and motioned me to sit. I've reviewed everything you sent, she said, a manila folder open in front of her. The police report, photos, and your documentation timeline. It's a good start, Conrad, but we need to be systematic now. Courts don't care about feelings, they care about facts and patterns. I've been keeping notes on everything, I said, sliding my phone across her desk. All the times I can remember her being drunk around the kids. Dates, what happened, who else was there. Dana scrolled through my timeline, nodding. This is exactly what we need. Now I want to outline our 3-point strategy. She clicked a pen and drew 3 boxes on her legal pad. First, we file for emergency custody based on the incident and protective order. Second, we document every interaction and sobriety violation. Third, and this is crucial, we maintain absolute composure. No angry texts, no shouting, nothing that makes you look unstable. I nodded. I've already stopped responding to her messages. Perfect. Save them all. When she gets no reaction, she'll escalate. That's when people reveal themselves. Dana leaned forward. I need you to invest in a body camera for exchanges. Record everything, every time. I remembered the hot summers working construction during college, how we'd film inspections to protect ourselves from liability. Same principle, different stakes. I can do that, I said. Good. Now the emergency hearing is Friday. Judge Harmon tends to be skeptical of immediate custody changes unless there's compelling evidence. We have the police report and the bruising, which helps, But be prepared for Riza's attorney to paint you as overreacting. Who's representing her? Greg Hollander, Dana said with a slight grimace. He specializes in high-conflict custody cases. He'll try to make this about you, not about what Riza did. I felt my jaw tighten. How do we counter that? With facts, Conrad. With documentation so thorough it can't be dismissed. On the way home, I stopped at an electronics store and bought a small body camera with cloud storage. When I got back to my truck, I had a missed call from Maria Patel, the school counselor. Mr. Henderson, I wanted to let you know Ava came to see me today. She was complaining of stomach aches again, and when we talked, she mentioned being afraid of mom nights. I think she's worried about the custody situation. I gripped the steering wheel harder. Has she said anything specific? She mentioned her mom getting mad and saying mean things, and that sometimes she has to take care of Liam when mom falls asleep. Maria paused. I'm required to document these conversations. Would you like me to provide a statement for your custody hearing? Yes, I said, feeling sick that my 11-year-old had been carrying this burden. That would help a lot. When I picked up the kids from school, I tried to act normal, but Ava was quiet, watching me with those observant eyes that missed nothing. Dad, she said as we drove home, is Mom coming back tonight? No, honey. Remember what we talked about? Mom's staying somewhere else for a while. Good, she whispered so softly I barely caught it. Janice Wilcox was watering her front garden when we pulled into the driveway. She waved, then walked over as the kids went inside. Conrad, I've been thinking about what you asked. I'm happy to write down what I've seen and heard over the past year. She lowered her voice. Those nights when Riza was shouting so loud I could hear it through the walls. The time she backed into my mailbox and could barely stand up straight. I'll put it all in writing for you. Thank you, Janice. That means a lot. My phone buzzed with texts throughout the evening. You're destroying our family. You set me up with those cops. You've always been jealous of my freedom. You'll regret taking my children. I saved each one without responding. Evidence, not emotion. That was the plan. Friday morning came fast. I dropped the kids at school with extra long hugs, then met Dana at the courthouse. She looked crisp and prepared. I felt like I might throw up. Riza and Greg Hollander were already seated when we entered the courtroom. Riza had dressed carefully, conservative blue dress, minimal makeup, hair pulled back neatly, the perfect picture of a concerned mother. When the hearing began, Hollander went straight for the jugular. Your Honor, my client is the victim of an overzealous husband who has manufactured a crisis to gain custody advantage. One regrettable incident during a stressful evening has been weaponized against a loving mother. Dana countered with methodical precision. She presented the police report, the photographs of Liam's arm, my documentation timeline, Maria's statement about Ava's anxiety, and Janice's written account of previous incidents. This is not one incident, Your Honor. This is the breaking point in a pattern of dangerous behavior that has placed 2 children at risk. When the judge asked Riza directly about her drinking, she admitted to occasional social drinking, but denied any problem. I kept my face neutral even as the lie twisted in my gut. Judge Harmon's ruling came after nearly 3 hours. Temporary full custody to me with supervised visitation for Riza twice weekly. She would also need to complete alcohol assessment and adhere to testing protocols. Riza's face darkened with each word. When the gavel fell, she whispered something to Hollander that made him shake his head in warning. That evening, the kids and I ate spaghetti at our kitchen table. We all tried to pretend things were normal, but the empty chair spoke louder than our forced conversation. After they went to bed, I walked through the house checking locks twice. Not because I thought Riza would break in, but because I needed the ritual of security. Her anger hadn't cooled, it had just changed shape, and we were only at the beginning. A week passed in relative calm. Not easy, but predictable. I learned to make Ava's lunch just the way she liked it. Crusts cut off, apple slices on the side. Liam needed his dinosaur shirt washed every other night. Small things I'd known but never had to remember before because Riza had handled them. At night I'd sit at the kitchen table with my laptop open, updating the custody log Dana suggested I keep. Wednesday. Riza arrived 5 minutes late to supervised visit. Thursday. Breathalyzer reading at pickup showed 0.00, but supervisor noted she seemed agitated and erratic. Friday, Riza canceled visitation, claiming illness. By Saturday morning, I noticed something remarkable. Liam hadn't woken up crying in 3 nights straight. And Ava, my serious girl who carried the world on her shoulders, actually laughed when we made pancakes shaped like cartoon characters. "Dad, yours looks like it got run over," she giggled, pointing at my lopsided attempt at a bear. "It's abstract art," I defended myself, and the sound of her laughter filled a space in my chest I hadn't realized was empty. Monday afternoon, while the kids were at after-school activities, I drove to the police station. Officer Nate Ellis had called earlier, saying he had copies of the police reports ready. "Thanks for this," I said as he handed me a thin folder. Ellis leaned against his desk. "There's not much here, just the recent domestic and 2 noise complaints from last year." His expression turned serious. "But I've seen cases like this before, Henderson. She's unpredictable when cornered. Keep your guard up." I nodded, thinking about the relative peace of the past week. "She's been following the rules so far. That's how it usually starts." Ellis tapped the folder. "Document everything, even the small stuff." That evening, Dana called with an update. "I've filed the motion for full custody," she said. "The hearing's set for 3 weeks from now." "That sounds promising," I replied, stirring pasta for dinner. "Don't celebrate yet." Hollander just submitted a counter-petition arguing that Riza is actively seeking treatment and deserves joint custody. Dana's voice was measured. "The judge has indicated he's willing to consider her progress." My stomach dropped. "But what about Liam's arm? The drinking? Judges like rehabilitation stories. They want to see families reconciled when possible." Dana sighed. "This is normal, Conrad. We have the stronger case. Just keep doing what you're doing." After dinner, I helped the kids with homework and started the bedtime routine. Just as I finished reading Liam's story, my phone lit up with an unknown number. I almost declined it, but something told me to answer. "Hello? Conrad." Riza's voice was soft, almost sober. "Don't hang up." I switched on the voice recorder app Dana had instructed me to install. "What do you need, Riza?" "I miss them." Her voice cracked. "I miss you too. I've been thinking about everything and I'm sorry, really sorry." I said nothing. "I've started seeing someone, a counselor. She's helping me understand my triggers." Riza paused. "I think we could have a fresh start. For the kids." "Riza, just listen." She cut in, her tone shifting subtly. "I know you think you've got this all sewn up. The perfect dad with his perfect evidence. But you're forgetting how well I know you." The hair on my neck stood up. "Remember that time you spanked Liam when he ran into the street? Or how you screamed at Ava when she spilled juice on your laptop?" Her voice hardened. "Two can play the documentation game, Conrad. Is that a threat?" I kept my voice steady. "It's reality. Drop this custody nonsense and we can work something out." The line went silent for a beat. "Otherwise, I'll make sure the judge sees another side of perfect daddy." I ended the call and sat in the dark hallway for several minutes, my heart hammering. The things she mentioned had happened, but not how she described them. The context was all wrong, twisted into something ugly. The next morning, I met Dana at her office and played the recording. "Well," Dana said, a grim smile crossing her face as the audio ended. "She just made your case stronger. Threats and manipulation aren't exactly stellar parenting qualities." She typed rapid notes. "We'll submit this with a motion to limit contact. The judge needs to see who she really is when she thinks no one's watching." That evening, I tucked the kids into bed early. Ava had homework to finish, but she looked exhausted, and I decided one night of incomplete math wouldn't destroy her future. "Dad?" she asked as I turned off her light. "Yeah, sweetheart. Is Mom coming back home?" I sat on the edge of her bed. "I don't know yet. There are some things we need to work out first, but no matter what happens, you and Liam will be safe. I promise." She nodded and rolled over. I closed her door softly and headed downstairs to double-check the locks, my new nighttime ritual. That's when I heard it, the low rumble of an idling car outside our house. I moved carefully to the living room window and peered through the blinds. A sedan sat across the street, headlights off. Even in the darkness, I recognized Riza's car. I stood perfectly still, watching. After about 2 minutes, the headlights flashed on, and the car sped away. My hands trembled slightly as I called the non-emergency police line to report the incident. The dispatcher took down the details and said they would log it as a possible intimidation attempt. But without direct contact, they couldn't take action. I hung up and stared at the empty street. The relative calm of the past week suddenly felt like the eye of a hurricane, and we were moving back into the storm. 2 weeks crawled by in a brittle peace. The kids slowly returned to their routines. Liam stopped checking the locks before bed, and Ava started talking about her friends at school again instead of just staring at her plate during dinner. I'd almost started to breathe normally when Dana called. "The judge granted Hollander's motion," she said, her voice tight. "Riza gets an unsupervised weekend." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white. "What? How?" Hollander presented 3 weeks of AA attendance records and a letter from her therapist. It was enough to convince Judge Harmon she deserves a trial period. Dana sighed. "I fought it, Conrad. But the court leans toward reunification when possible. She hurt Liam. 3 weeks of meetings doesn't erase that." "I know, but the judge sees a mother trying to reform, and that carries weight." Dana's tone shifted to something harder. "Document everything. Have the kids keep their phones charged. If she slips at all, any sign of drinking, any concerning behavior, we'll use it." Friday arrived like a punch to the gut. I packed the kids' overnight bags carefully, slipping in their favorite snacks and books. Ava watched me from the doorway of her room, arms crossed tight over her chest. "I don't want to go," she said quietly. I knelt in front of her, putting my hands on her shoulders. "I know, sweetheart, I'm not happy about it either. But the judge says we have to try. What if she gets angry again?" The memory of Riza's nails digging into Liam's arm flashed in my mind. "If something feels wrong, anything at all, you call me immediately. I've put both our phones on the emergency bypass so they'll ring even on silent." Ava nodded, but her eyes remained doubtful. The police station parking lot was our designated exchange point. I spotted Riza's car when we pulled in. She stood beside it, hair neatly combed, wearing a sundress I didn't recognize. She looked almost normal. For a second, I felt a pang of what might have been. The kids climbed out slowly. Liam clutched his backpack to his chest like armor. "Hey guys," Riza said, her smile bright but strained. "I've got pizza and ice cream at home." She barely glanced my way, a deliberate distance in her posture. I handed her the bags. "Their medications are in the front pocket. Liam needs his allergy pill before bed." Riza nodded stiffly. "I know how to take care of my children, Conrad." I swallowed the retort that rose in my throat. This wasn't about winning an argument. "Call if you need anything." I watched them drive away, fighting every instinct to follow. The house felt hollowed out when I returned. Too quiet, too empty. I wandered from room to room, straightening things that didn't need straightening. I'd never realized how much of my identity had become wrapped up in protecting them until I couldn't. I was grilling chicken for dinner when my phone buzzed with a text. Ava's name flashed on the screen. "Mom smells like beer." My stomach dropped. I called immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried 3 more times. Nothing. Panic rising, I called Officer Porter. "Elaine, I need a welfare check at Riza's apartment. Ava just texted me that her mother's been drinking." "I'll send a unit over," she said. "Stay put, Conrad. Don't escalate things." The next hour was the longest of my life. When Officer Porter finally called back, her voice was apologetic. Officers found nothing conclusive. The apartment was clean. Both children appeared unharmed. Mrs. Henderson denied drinking and there were no visible bottles. "She hid them," I said. "She knew you were coming." "Maybe," Porter conceded, "but without evidence, there's nothing we can do." Saturday passed in a fog of anxiety. I called twice for check-ins that Riza kept brief and controlled. In the background, I could hear the TV blaring. The kids sounded subdued. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I grabbed a blanket and drove to Riza's apartment complex, parking where I could see her unit. The lights went off around 1. At 3, a man I didn't recognize left the building. I took photos, noting the timestamp. I must have dozed off because I woke to sunlight streaming through the windshield. My neck ached from the awkward angle. I drove home to shower, then returned to wait for the exchange. At 6, Riza's car pulled into the station lot. The kids climbed out slowly, Shoulders slumped. Liam ran to me first, wrapping his arms around my waist without a word. Ava followed, her face closed off. "They were perfect," Riza said brightly. "We had such a nice time." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Back home, while Liam took a shower, Ava unpacked her bag in silence. "What happened?" I asked gently. She shrugged. "Nothing. Ava, please, I need to know." "Mom's friend came over," she finally said. "The one with the motorcycle. He brought beer. They watched movies with us, but then they went to Mom's room and closed the door. Later, as I tucked Liam in, he whispered, 'Mom's friend called me squirt and messed up my hair a lot.' I didn't like it. I wrote down every detail that night, emailing everything to Dana. Monday morning, we sat in court as Greg Hollander stood before the judge, his expression triumphant. My client had a successful visitation with her children, he announced. Yet Mr. Henderson sent police to her home based on paranoid suspicions. He even slept in his vehicle outside her apartment, behavior that borders on stalking. The judge frowned at me. "Mr. Henderson, this court takes rehabilitation seriously. You must allow her a chance to recover." I stared back, stunned into silence, fury building in my chest like a storm. Outside the courthouse, I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to clear the frustration clouding my vision. The judge's words kept echoing. "You must allow her a chance to recover." As if I was the problem. As if documenting her behavior was somehow worse than the behavior itself. Dana touched my elbow. "Conference room now." We drove separately to her office. I watched the traffic lights change, mechanical and predictable. If only people worked the same way. Dana's conference room had that polished wood smell like furniture polish and old books. She closed the door and set her briefcase down with a thud. "That wasn't great," she admitted. "But it's not over. Not by a long shot." I slumped in the chair. He looked at me like I was crazy. "Hollander played it well," she said, "but we're going to play it better." Dana pulled out her legal pad and started writing rapidly. "First, we need to prove what happened this weekend. I'm ordering a forensic hair follicle test for Riza. It'll show alcohol use patterns going back months. Can you force her to take one?" "Through discovery, yes. We'll file it as essential evidence for the children's safety." Her pen hadn't stopped moving. "Second, I'm subpoenaing the apartment complex's security footage from this weekend." I straightened. "There are cameras?" "Most complexes have them in common areas and parking lots. If she was drinking or brought unauthorized visitors around the children, we'll have it on tape." For the first time in days, I felt something like hope. "What else?" "Install Life 360 on Ava's phone. It's for her safety, but it'll also document where they are and where they aren't supposed to be." Dana looked up from her notes. "Conrad, I need you to keep being exactly what you've been, calm, thorough, and focused on the children, no matter how much she provokes you." I nodded. "I can do that." The week dragged by in a haze of work, school pickups, and endless documentation. Ava grew quieter, jumping whenever the phone rang. Liam started having nightmares again, crawling into my bed around 2 a.m. most nights. I held him until his breathing steadied, wondering how many more scars this would leave. Friday morning, Dana called. The footage came in. An hour later, I watched grainy security video on Dana's laptop. There was Riza stumbling through the parking lot at 9:45 p.m. Saturday night, clearly unsteady. The kids trailed behind her, Ava gripping Liam's hand tightly. "Watch this timestamp," Dana said, pointing to the corner. 11:20 p.m. The footage showed Riza and a man with a motorcycle helmet leaving the building. The kids were nowhere in sight. "They left them alone," I said, my voice hollow. Dana nodded grimly. "For nearly 40 minutes. The next clip showed Riza returning, staggering worse than before. "And the hair test?" I asked. Dana slid a report across the table. "Positive for chronic alcohol use. The levels indicate heavy drinking within the testing period." She compiled everything into a thick binder. The footage screenshots, test results, Ava's texts, officer reports, and witness statements from Janice and the school counselor. The evidence of Riza's descent was clinical and undeniable. "We file on Monday," Dana said. "The judge can't ignore this." That night I tried to relax, reading on the couch while the kids were with Riza for their court-ordered Friday evening. Just a few hours, not overnight. The novel couldn't hold my attention. I kept checking my phone. At 8:47 p.m., it buzzed. Ava's text made my heart stop. Mom left us downstairs, she's not back. I grabbed my keys and was in the car before I could even think. I called Elaine Porter directly as I drove, the speedometer creeping past the limit. "I'm 5 minutes out," she said. "Meet me there." The apartment complex was a blur of concrete and faded paint under amber security lights. I spotted Officer Porter's cruiser pulling in just ahead of me. We jogged toward the building together. Ava and Liam were huddled on a bench in the lobby, no coats despite the evening chill. Liam's cheeks were tear-streaked. Ava looked up, relief washing over her face. "Where's your mother?" Porter asked gently. "Apartment 307. Ava whispered. "There's a party." Porter nodded at me. "Stay with them." I crouched down, pulling both kids close. Liam burrowed against my chest. "It's okay," I murmured. "I'm here now." 10 minutes later, Porter returned with Riza, whose mascara had smeared beneath glassy eyes. She clutched a red plastic cup, liquid sloshing over the rim. "Mr. Henderson," Porter said formally, "would you take the children to your vehicle while I speak with Ms. Henderson?" I guided Ava and Liam outside, settling them in the back seat with the heater running. Through the lobby windows, I could see Porter conducting a field sobriety test. Riza wobbled, missed touching her nose, then refused to continue. When I returned alone, Riza's face contorted with rage. "You," she spat, "you set this up. You destroyed me." I met her eyes steadily. "You did that yourself." She lunged toward me, but Porter stepped between us. "That's enough, Ms. Henderson." Riza's anger collapsed into wild, desperate sobs as Porter secured the handcuffs. "You can't take my kids," she slurred, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "They're mine too." I watched her being led to the patrol car, feeling nothing but a cold, settled certainty. This was the moment everything would change. Behind me, the lobby door opened. Ava had followed me in, her thin arms wrapped around herself under the harsh fluorescent lights. I turned and she pressed her face against my chest, shoulders shaking silently. Monday morning dawned clear and cold. I dressed carefully, navy suit, subtle tie, polished shoes. The kind of details that shouldn't matter, but somehow do in courtrooms. Ava and Liam were staying with Janice, who'd promised pancakes and no questions. Dana met me on the courthouse steps, clutching the evidence binder under her arm. Her face was calm, focused. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded, my throat suddenly tight. "Whatever happens, thank you." The courtroom felt smaller today, the wooden benches harder. Riza sat beside Greg Hollander at their table, her face deliberately composed. She'd dressed for effect. Modest blouse, minimal makeup, hair pulled back neatly. The sober, concerned mother. Our eyes met once. I expected anger, but instead saw something hollow and afraid. I looked away. Judge Mercer entered, and we all rose. The routine formalities passed in a blur until Dana stood. "Your Honor, we have new evidence regarding Ms. Henderson's continued violation of court-ordered monitoring conditions." Dana approached with the binder, methodically walking through each exhibit. The security footage played on the courtroom monitor. Riza staggering across the parking lot, the children trailing behind her. Then the timestamp jump showing her leaving them alone. The hair test results followed, projected in clinical detail. "These levels," Dana explained, "are consistent with chronic heavy alcohol consumption throughout the monitoring period." Greg Hollander shifted in his seat. I'd seen that look before, an attorney recognizing a losing battle. "Furthermore," Dana continued, "we have Officer Porter's report from Friday night documenting Ms. Henderson's failure of a field sobriety test while the minor children were left unsupervised. Officer Porter had arrived early, waiting in the gallery. When called to testify, she approached the stand with measured steps. Her testimony was brief, factual, the kind that leaves no room for interpretation. I found Ms. Henderson at apartment 307, visibly intoxicated, holding an alcoholic beverage. She failed standard field sobriety tests and became combative. Hollander attempted cross-examination. Officer, isn't it possible my client was simply at a social gathering? She left 2 minor children unattended in a building lobby for over 30 minutes while intoxicated, Porter replied. That's child endangerment regardless of the social context. Judge Mercer's face had grown increasingly stern. He reviewed each document carefully, pausing longest on the security footage. When Hollander rose for his defense, the energy had drained from his usual performance. Your Honor, my client acknowledges a lapse in judgment but is committed to rehabilitation. We request continued joint custody with enhanced monitoring. Mr. Hollander, the judge interrupted, your client has violated every monitoring condition this court established. She has endangered these children repeatedly while under evaluation. What exactly are you asking me to consider that outweighs this pattern? The courtroom fell silent. Hollander stammered something about family unity and second chances, but his words sounded hollow even to him. Judge Mercer looked directly at Riza. Ms. Henderson, this court gave you multiple opportunities to demonstrate responsible parenting. Instead, you've shown consistent disregard for both court orders and your children's safety. He turned to review his notes, then delivered his ruling in a clipped final tone. This court awards full physical and legal custody of both minor children to Conrad Henderson. Riza Henderson will be permitted supervised visitation only after completion of an inpatient rehabilitation program and demonstration of 90 days continuous sobriety, verified by court-appointed monitors. He continued methodically through the remaining points. Protective order extended for 12 months. Spousal support denied due to documented financial misconduct. The family home awarded to me with appropriate equity adjustments. The gavel struck with finality. Beside me, Dana exhaled slowly. Across the aisle, Riza collapsed forward, her shoulders shaking with silent tears. Hollander awkwardly patted her back while gathering his papers. I felt nothing. No triumph, no vindication. Just a profound, exhausted relief that it was over. Outside the courtroom, Dana shook my hand firmly. This is the cleanest win I've ever seen, she said. The decree will take about 2 weeks to formalize, but it's done, Conrad. You did what you needed to do. 2 weeks later, I stood at the mailbox, holding the thick envelope from the county clerk. Inside was the formal decree, pages of legal language that boiled down to one simple truth. My children were safe now. That night, I tucked Ava and Liam into bed. Liam asked for 2 stories instead of 1, and I couldn't say no. Ava had started sleeping with her door open again, a small sign that the fear was receding. After they fell asleep, I stood in the hallway between their rooms, watching them. Liam's arm was flung overhead, his breathing deep and even. Ava's face had softened in sleep, the worried crease between her eyebrows finally gone. For the first time in months, maybe years, they both slept peacefully without startling awake at midnight noises or phantom arguments. I leaned against the wall, letting the reality wash over me. It was done. Riza's downfall wasn't just a temporary setback she could charm or manipulate her way out of. It was irreversible. The life she'd built and destroyed was gone. Weeks passed, each day blending into the next as we found our rhythm again. Life without Riza's chaos felt both simpler and strangely hollow, like walking through a house where all the furniture had been rearranged. The space was the same, but you still bumped into corners you weren't expecting. I focused on rebuilding routines for the kids, school drop-offs at 7:45, therapy with Dr. Winters every Tuesday afternoon, homework at the kitchen table while I prepped dinner, movie nights on Fridays with popcorn, small rituals that anchored our days. Ava was sleeping better. Liam had stopped flinching at sudden movements. Some mornings I'd catch them laughing together over breakfast, and it sounded like it used to, before everything fractured. I tried not to think about Riza much, but news had a way of finding me even when I wasn't looking. First came the call from Tom Reeves, who worked with Riza at the marketing firm. Just thought you should know, he said awkwardly. HR found the arrest record when they did a routine check, and someone sent them the court transcripts. They let her go yesterday. I thanked him for the information and hung up, feeling that strange mix of vindication and heaviness that had become familiar. The following week, Ms. Martinez from the sober living facility called to verify Riza's former address. She's been evicted for non-compliance, she explained. 3 missed check-ins, 2 failed tests, and she hasn't paid for the month. We need somewhere to forward her mail. I gave her Irene's address instead of mine. The rules were clear. I wasn't obligated to be Riza's safety net anymore. Even Hollander had abandoned ship. Dana mentioned it during our final paperwork meeting. Hollander withdrew as counsel. Unpaid fees. She's representing herself now in the financial proceedings. I nodded, unsurprised. The dominoes were falling exactly as they should. Irene Wallace stopped calling after the second supervised visit. The court transcripts had become public record. Every slurred threat, every missed obligation laid bare for anyone to read. She'd sat rigid and silent in the visitation room, watching her daughter struggle to connect with children who now regarded her warily. Family embarrassment was always Irene's breaking point, Dana had observed. She can excuse a lot, but not public shame. 2 months after the final ruling, Janice Wilcox came to my door with a casserole and a troubled expression. "I saw Riza yesterday," she said, handing me the dish. "Outside Kroger. She looked different, thinner. She was just standing there with this plastic bag of stuff like she didn't know where to go next." I set the casserole on the counter. "Did she say anything?" "No, she saw me and walked away." Janice hesitated. "I'm not saying you should do anything. You did what you had to. I just thought you should know." I remembered the way Riza used to fling her keys on the counter when she came home, the jingle of metal against tile, the sound of her laugh before the drinking got bad, the smell of her shampoo on the pillow next to mine, memories that belonged to someone else's life now. "Thanks," I told Janice, "for letting me know." The court monitoring reports continued to arrive monthly. The language was clinical, factual. Subject has missed 3 consecutive counseling appointments. Visitation privileges suspended pending compliance. Supervision term extended by 60 days. Subject failed to appear for scheduled drug-alcohol screening. Counted as failed test per court mandate. Subject has demonstrated inconsistent attendance at required programs. No progress toward unsupervised visitation status. Each report another nail in the coffin of her former life. I heard from Tom that her car had been repossessed. Dana mentioned her credit score had tanked after the judgments. Former friends, the ones who'd turned a blind eye to her drinking, stopped answering her calls once the drama exceeded the entertainment value. One afternoon, sitting in Dana's office to sign the final property transfer, I set down my pen and said, "It still feels heavy." Dana looked at me for a long moment. "That's the weight of justice. It's supposed to." She was right. It wasn't vengeance I felt. It was the somber recognition that actions have consequences, and Riza was finally facing hers. Last Tuesday, checking the mail after work, I found something unexpected. A housing assistance application form, rejected and returned to sender. Somehow it had found its way to my mailbox instead of wherever Riza was staying now. I almost tossed it without looking. But something made me unfold the crumpled pages. There in the emergency contact field was my name and phone number. And in the relationship to applicant box where it had once said husband, there was only a blank space. The first warm day in April found me on my knees in the backyard, turning over soil with a hand trowel, while Ava carefully arranged tomato seedlings in a neat row. "Daddy, do we need to plant them deeper this year?" she asked, her chestnut hair caught in the breeze. "That's right," I said. "Remember what happened last summer? They got too top-heavy." Ava nodded, serious and methodical as she pressed each plant into its hole. Her fingers weren't tentative anymore. 6 months ago, she'd flinch at sudden movements, startle at loud noises. Now she hummed while she worked, shoulders relaxed, focused on the task. "Can I put the fish stuff in?" Liam called from the porch, paintbrush in hand, blue splatters decorating his t-shirt and the half-finished birdhouse in front of him. "Fish emulsion," I corrected, smiling. "Not yet, bud. Let's get them settled first." The ordinary rhythm of a Saturday afternoon wrapped around us like a blanket. Inside, the dishwasher hummed its cycle. Liam's tablet played quiet music through the open window. A neighbor's lawnmower droned a few houses down. We'd made it. After everything, the court battles, the sleepless nights, the careful documentation, we'd reached this place of quiet normalcy. Sometimes I still woke up braced for crisis, but those moments were growing fewer. The kids slept through the night now. Ava hadn't had a stomachache before school in weeks. That evening, after spaghetti dinner and math homework spread across the kitchen table, the doorbell rang. Officer Porter stood on the porch, her uniform crisp as always, expression professional. "Evening, Conrad. Just following up on the quarterly supervision report." I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "Everything okay?" She nodded, just confirming that the visitation schedule remains as ordered. Riza has maintained technical compliance but hasn't progressed toward unsupervised status. "What does that mean exactly?" I asked, though I had a pretty good idea. She attends the minimum required sessions, but the counselor notes she's resistant to meaningful engagement. No demonstration of sustained sobriety beyond the supervised periods. Porter shifted her weight. "The court won't consider custody modifications without at least 12 months of documented progress." I nodded, feeling that familiar mixture of relief and something heavier. "Any other concerns I should know about?" "Nothing that affects your situation." She hesitated. "The rest is in the written report." I thanked her and watched her patrol car pull away before going back inside. The kids were bent over their homework, pencils scratching across paper, safe in the warm light of our kitchen. The written report arrived 3 days later. I read it after the kids went to bed, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. Most of it was clinical, official, supervision hours maintained, visit outcomes within parameters. But the addendum contained more. Riza now lived in a single-room efficiency apartment in Westbrook, working part-time filing medical records at a clinic. Her attendance at court-mandated AA meetings was spotty. The health assessment noted weight loss and elevated blood pressure. Irene's name was conspicuously absent from the visitor logs. After 6 months of sitting stiffly through supervised visits, making empty small talk while Riza fumbled to connect with increasingly distant children, Irene had finally given up the pretense. I closed the folder and rubbed my eyes. The fire Riza had lit was finally burning itself out, far from our home. The following Sunday, I sat on the porch swing as sunset painted the sky in watercolors of orange and purple. Inside, the kids were showered and in pajamas, reading before bedtime. The birdhouse Liam had painted, electric blue with yellow trim, hung from the maple tree, waiting for spring visitors. Across the street, a young couple walked a golden retriever puppy. Next door, the Wilsons' teenage son washed his car in the driveway. Normal life unfolding in 1,000 ordinary ways. I thought about Riza sitting alone in that small room 3 towns away, facing a counselor twice weekly, seeing our children for just 2 monitored hours every week. The consequences of her choices had hardened into permanence now. The woman who once shared this home was a stranger, reduced to a court case number and supervision schedule. Looking toward the horizon where the sun was slipping away, I felt the weight of everything that had happened and everything that would never happen again. When your protector becomes the danger, you don't beg the fire to calm. You rebuild where it can never reach again. I believe stories such as this find us for a reason. If this one touches you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. In the meantime, there are 2 stories on the screen that are even better.